Welcome to another edition of Soul Sessions.
Hello.
I'm your host, Dr. Robert Maldonado, and I'm here with my wife and partner.
Deborah Barrett Maldonado.
So today we're talking about the Mother Archetype in honor of Mother's Day.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful day.
Beautiful day, and such a special time for all families all around the world.
Mm.
We're going to be talking about something pretty big, which is the Mother Archetype in the Jungian sense of an archetype.
And it's such a big topic. There's so much more to it than what we're going to talk about today, but we're going to give you the highlights.
Absolutely. So we broke it down into the biology of motherhood,
Mm-hmm. The physical experience of it,
the psychology of it, meaning what do we do with this knowledge and this biology and this archetype that we deal with as human beings?
So more socially and emotionally, how we interact with people and what goes on inside of us.
Yes, and how it plays into relationships, which I think is really an interesting point.
Both work and love relationships.
Both of them. And then finally, the spiritual element of it, because there are all these different dimensions to it. And us working throughout the years with people and putting them through the individuation process, the mother archetype always plays a big role.
What I noticed in our coaching coaches that go through our coach training is that one of the big, and when I work with clients privately, one of the biggest transformations that happen in their life, a lot of them come for love and relationships, but it's really relationships with women or as a woman. They realize that their mother plays a big role. And so a lot of what happens is they heal the relationship with their mother that's been estranged, or they see their mother in a different way. They feel like their mother understands them because they're changing inside. And then also the mother being mothers, kind of changing the dynamic with their children. So I see this pattern with both being our mothers and then being the mother. And so there's a very powerful force the mother archetype has on us, and what it means to be a mother, and how do we care for our children. And those of us like myself, who Mother's Day is really hard for me because I never had kids. So how do we deal with that the barren, the mother who couldn't have children, how does she deal with the idea of motherhood and all that stuff? So lots of juicy things to talk about.
Yes. Are we going to do Q&A?
Yes, we'll do Q&A at the end. But I want to give a shout out to one of our birthday girls today. Happy birthday. Hope we're doing this just for you.
So, and, before we get rolling, do you want to lead us in a little meditation?
Me? I thought you were going to do it this time. Do you want me to do it? Okay. So I just want to lead you through just a grounding meditation just to get you centered and listen to this wonderful topic, because it may trigger some things in you, and I want you to be grounded and able to receive. So close your eyes for a minute and just take a few deep breaths and just exhale all the tension in your body. Just close down all the other browsers and just focus here now in this moment. And just get a sense of your body from your toes all the way down to the top, up to the top of your head. Every cell of your body. And just be grateful for this body that's here to support you in this life, that houses your soul, your experience. Feel an amazing connection to this beautiful vessel holding your life experience. And deep within your body, there's a beautiful space in your heart. Imagine it being a beautiful light opening up like a beautiful flower, expanding out all the petals. and feeling so much love for your body and its support it's given you, keeping you healthy, breathing. And allow that love for yourself and your body to flow through every cell, nerve, fiber of your being. And deep within this beautiful centered space, may you be open to hear something transformational today in our talk, and be free of something that has kept you stuck. So open your eyes and come back to the room.
Thank you.
And the reason I did that with the body is because I see, we're going to talk about the biology. The body is really our mother. It's housing our soul, our experience in life. It's a vessel for us, and so it's the mother.
Absolutely, that's a good way to put it. So,
so let's first of all talk about what an archetype is, so people understand what that is. It's not a fairy lady in the spiritual goddess world, and she's going to come, and it's not a being.
Right. So the word goes back to Plato. The Greeks always we go back to Greek ideas, and he had this idea that the universe, the universal mind, if you will, created everything we see from ideas, and those ideas were the template, the original form of the things we see in the world. For example, the sphere. You notice stars, planets, almost everything takes in space takes that shape of a sphere. So that's an archetype of a planet, a star. You know, it operates universally.
So it's a universal concept that is part of just being conscious. Consciousness
of creation.
Yeah.
So everything we see, for example, a tree, he would say, well, there must have been an idea of a tree originally in the universal mind as thought, not as matter. And then the trees that we see in the world are all patterned on the archetype of the tree.
Would it be safe to say biologically that it's kind of like the DNA, how it's recorded and kind of like has codes, and that each code has a different archetype, like creates a different archetype, or maybe that's how it's expressed?
Sure.
So yeah, so the archetype, I always think of it as quite simply a universal pattern. It's something we all share. A human being is an archetype. A dog is an archetype. A hero is an archetype. We all share this idea, like we all can relate to it. It's symbolic in a way. Well, the symbol is different than the archetype. There's the hero, and then it's symbolized by Wonder Woman or Batman or Superman. Those are symbols of the archetype, but not the actual archetype. So we can't really see the archetype. We just know it's an idea because we see the pattern of it. So we see the expression of that archetype. So we can't really see the mother archetype. All we can see is the symbolic representation of that archetype.
Yes. And so Jung took this idea and incorporated into his psychology. His idea was that we must have these archetypes in our own unconscious mind, and we're pre-programmed in a sense. We're born with them. They're part of our factory settings. We already have them in us. In a sense, you can call them instincts also, that they play out instinctually, unconsciously.
So it's more than just a biological, kind of, I have a mother and I have this biological need and I'm going to suckle because it's in my DNA. But there's a wider concept of this idea of mother, of why do we stay in touch with our mother after the suckling's gone, and why when we're grown up, we have still that bond with the mother. There's something very special about that.
So in biology, we see it play out, like you say, in DNA from one-cell organisms all the way to human life and the higher animals that have very complex social systems. That archetype is continuously playing out and has been playing out throughout all our evolution. So it's very old. And our modern way of dealing with, let's say, our mothers and in relationships and with the earth as well is very new.
Mother Nature.
Yeah, it's kind
Mother
of the latest incarnation is us moving the planet around or reshuffling the structure of the earth in our own image. And some people argue, well, is the new the better? Like, is it the peak of evolution, or is the older system that has developed over millions of years a better way to live in the world, let's say?
And what's important to know, like some universal themes of the mother are that she's the creator and also the destroyer. She can create, she brings life. Well, you've heard your mother say, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. We've heard that before. But it's that kind of, if you look at nature, it has a destructive force. It's not just creating, it's storms and viruses and a lot of different things that happen to destroy. Fires. We have the fires in California, but they're a natural part of nature, the cycle of nature. And so the mother is in all this good, perfect, this pure love and caring. It's also the light and dark side of it, which is the destructive force, which it can destroy as much as create. Because you can't, if you have the power to create, you also have the power to destroy. And I think we have to get out of that duality of, I only want the good side. I only want the positive side. We have to accept both the light and the dark. That's really why I like Jung's work, because I think before I did this, it was all like I was in hypnotherapy and that kind of like thinking positive type of self-help. And it was all about being positive and then pushing away the negative. Like, don't be negative, don't talk negative, don't be critical to yourself, only do good. And then it came into this like self-punishment of I have to act and behave perfectly in order to manifest what I want.
Right.
And then just understanding what we're doing with Jungian psychology. I don't think I've ever known myself in such a deep way and understand the depths of our power and who we are as women and men. So this mother archetype is really a way for us to look beyond just the persona of this persona that I am, whether you're a mother or not, or whether we all have a mother, and what we're dealing with on that level. But there's a deeper psychic power that we're able to access if we understand it correctly.
Right, which brings us to the second level, the psychology. And for us, the challenge was, how do we incorporate these deeper concepts, because it is a depth psychology, into a coaching model, meaning where we're not pathologizing people's
mother issues.
The complexes. Like in Jungian therapy, they
in
talk
analysis, they talk about complexes.
The mother complex, the hero complex, those kind of things. We saw them as, we don't need to pathologize them. If most of us are going through these processes, then it's normal, essentially. We're meant to go through these things. Like
we all, think about it just in general with the emotions. We all have disgust and anger and fear and anxiety. And why is that so bad? Why do we have to put up a face that, like we always say, how are you doing? And I'm fine, I'm great. And inside you just want to say, it really sucks right now, or I'm really having a tough time. We're so afraid to just show how we really feel. And there's this shame of the dark side, or the things that aren't perfect. And, with the mother, it's the same thing. I work with a lot of women that are single mothers. And one of the biggest challenges they have is wanting to be a good mother. I want to be a good mother because my mother didn't show me attention, didn't show me love. She wasn't as kind to me. She, or she was so perfect and I want to be just like her. or compensating or whatever it is, and they have this kind of this high expectation of what a mother should be, and then they beat themselves up if they don't match up. Am I being a good mother? They're always questioning that and measuring themselves, comparing to the other mothers. And then for me, being single for a long time and then not being able to have kids, I'm a failure because I wasn't a mother, so comparing myself to my friends who all had kids and who, are, their daughters are all grown up and they're doing mother-daughter stuff. And it kind of pings in my heart a little bit sometimes. And it's okay to feel that, I know a lot of my clients have missed that window to have children and they have that pain, especially this weekend. And it's like, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to have regret a little bit and say, wow, I wish I would have found this work sooner. And you just be gentle with yourself and don't brush it off and say, well, everything happens for a reason and let me justify. It's about being open to all those emotions that we have.
Got it.
Around motherhood and around being that identity of mother.
Yeah. Do you mind if I back up a little bit?
Sure.
So we put it in context of individuation.
Sure.
I know this is not a class, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the way Jung saw it is, as we're growing up, we're developing a concept of ourselves, which he called the persona, our identity. And of course, we look to our parents for the template, right? How do I act? And for all of us, I'd say, we look to our mother because she's our primary relationship. She teaches us how to love, right? How to be
relate.
caring, how to care for another person. What do I do with these emotions, this attachment that I have to her, this dependency that I have to her. I have to deal as a child. I have to deal with all those emotions and come to terms with them somehow, so that I can go out into the world, and that becomes my persona.
And so we look at our mother and we say, she's either our ideal, or we say, I don't know, I don't like the way she is. I want to be different than her. So we either want to emulate her or reject her.
That's right. And
parts of her.
Yeah, we do that instinctively, unconsciously, that the things we experience as likable, as friendly, as open, as loving, we incorporate them into our persona. But the things that we say, oh, she might be punishment, she might be punishing, or withhold love, or rejection, or abandonment, or any of those things, then we have to push those things into the shadow. We say, I don't want to be that way. I never want to be that way.
Well, also too, the mother tends to discipline with praise and then shame. So we learn that that kind of pattern in the world is that if I do a good job, I'm going to be praised. But if I screw up, I'm going to be shamed. And we have that praise and shame pattern. And she's doing it because instinctively that's how she was raised, how she was disciplined, and a mother does have a good intention. She wants you to be a good child and a good human being and care. But the way she was taught discipline and how to rear you from her parent might not have been as super healthy either. And so we have this pattern from generation to generation passed down of that pattern of acceptance and non-acceptance. You're good or bad.
Yes. And so the individual then creates this persona and the shadow by default. Anything that doesn't fit into their self-identity, they push into the shadow. So when they come to us as a coach, now the task to help them individuate, in other words, to help them deal with a shadow and incorporate it, to become whole, in a sense, like Jung would say, is that now they have to face all those elements that they pushed away. Because most people, what they're doing is they're projecting those things they pushed away onto their physical mother. So they think, my mother screwed me up.
Yeah, my mother, she's the evil woman, or she's the best, most perfect woman, and I don't live up to her expectations. There's that too.
Yeah, it's that split between the good and the bad, the persona and the shadow. And so part of individuation, a big part of it, is can we come to terms with those two parts,
Mm-hmm.
who we are in society as a persona, the personality, and what we pushed away into the shadow, into the unconscious. Now we have to integrate them. And this is the difficult part, because projection is easy to say, well, she's the one that screwed me up, by
Projection
being,
is easy.
yeah, it's easy. You blame the other person, so you're off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
But what we tell people is, no, you have to take responsibility for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to see that it's in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those things might have happened, or they did
Mm-hmm.
happen, but it's your interpretation of that,
Mm-hmm.
the element that's in the unconscious, and now you have to come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Jung says it requires great moral courage to integrate the shadow, because now you have to accept that all those bad things you were seeing in your mother or blaming your mother for, they're really part of you.
And we have to accept this, not that we're a bad person. This isn't an identity, but here's, I think, the misconception of self-identity in general is that we think that our behavior dictates who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We think if I do this, I'm a good person. If I do this, I'm a bad person. And we define ourselves by our behavior or our emotions or what we accomplish. And that's not who we are. That's the persona. That's just the ego is always trying to like prop itself up and, look good to everyone else. And early in life, that's how the mother kind of came from that assumption as well, that we are how we act. So if you do good at school and you behave, you're going to, succeed in life. And so I'm going to teach you how to do that. And then, unconsciously, the mother is telling us, well, you're a bad girl. You're a bad girl. You need to be a good girl. You're a bad boy. You need to be, that's bad. And then you kind of use that, kind of tie your behavior so connected to your essence. And how we act, and we screw up, and we are, hurt people's feelings. That doesn't define us. That doesn't define us. It doesn't say, since I hurt Mary's feelings, that I must be a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how we were raised. And that's kind of that mother archetype. It's that if I cause harm, I must be evil in some way. And we have to know that, again, that duality is that we aren't what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could start looking at the dark side of the mother, and we can say, oh, I have a tendency to be a little selfish, or I have a tendency to be a little short, or I have a tendency to lose my temper. And that's just part of being human, versus I got to fix that because that's the bad part of me.
Yeah. I know we've spoken about kind of this trend since the 80s. Women have been entering the workforce in mass. And I don't think the psychology has caught up with what that entails, because you have now a lot of their mothers were stay-at-home moms, the domesticated mother, woman who served or was subservient to the man, or at least that's the way it appeared, right? And obviously there were divisions of labor, and it was
and the
cooperation.
Woman actually worked harder than the guy.
Yeah, and it was cooperation.
He was out having cocktails at lunch. Like if you ever saw Revolutionary Road.
Oh yeah.
He's like having sex with the secretary, and the woman's working and taking care of the kids. And
that's right. But it was, in a sense, it was cooperation to raise the kids. But a lot of independent women grew up with the idea of rejecting that and saying, no, I'm going to be a professional woman. I'm going to be independent. I have my own money, have my own lifestyle. The psychology of that is really interesting, and the way it plays out.
Well, when I was younger, I was thinking about this morning. We were talking about the mother archetype. I was thinking about when I was in church. I was raised Catholic. I was in church. I was like 7 years old. And ever since I was little, I always wanted to be a celebrity and a movie star. Like I loved, TV and like singing in front of my mirror, and I'm going to be a famous singer until someone told me I couldn't sing. But I always had this kind of adventurous spirit. And I remember looking at my mother at church and going, oh, she's so sweet. She has like family and stuff. But her life is so boring. She's not going to be famous like me. And I remember having that thought. But then when I got older and got to dating age, all I thought about was being just like my mom. It's like almost like I shut that freedom out, but it was still a part of me. It was still that seed was there that I kind of saw. Maybe I don't want the family life. And I didn't realize it until after we met. You and I met. I thought all my issues were with my dad. But after we met, I realized, oh my God, I was so afraid of being trapped and losing my power. And we talk about this, is that the it's love and power is the idea of what we see in the traditional marriage, or the old-fashioned marriage, was the father had the power, the mother gave us the love.
Yeah, Jung says that the love and power are the shadow of each other. So where there's kind of a tendency towards power, then love goes into the shadow. It doesn't mean it's not there. It exists, but it's repressed in a sense.
So when we think about work relationships and the power, and you see your mother being the stay-at-home mom, doesn't have her own bank account, can't make any financial decisions without the father. And then you become the corporate woman. You're saying, I'm never letting that happen to me. And even if you not even conscious of it, you may take the power role because you want to be in control, and you push love away, and not in you push romantic love away, but you also push your emotions away. And so you may, as a boss, either take the role of the hard, not let anyone kind of manipulate you, or feel like people are manipulating you like a child. You see your employees or your team as children. You take on that, whatever the mother archetype role. And then they also, if you have a female boss, you're projecting your mother onto her. So this game is playing out. Even though you're grown up, it's that same dynamic, or whatever your judgments are. And everyone's different. This isn't a cookie cutter. Every woman who had a stay-at-home mom acts this way. We all have a unique perception of what we liked, what we didn't like, the qualities and traits. But then we end up projecting that onto our female bosses. And there's I work with a lot of women that are very, successful, and their bosses are women. And there's always this tug with a power struggle with them. And it's because that female is projecting her mother's stuff, or her whole family dynamic onto her team. And there's certain people that will trigger you more, so you may feel targeted by your boss more than anyone else, because you have a quality that boss is connecting to something in her childhood, and so you can't prevent that. But you have to wonder, well, why is this happening to me? We fit together like puzzle pieces, just like with love. There's something in your boss that's triggering something in you. So I always say that you figure out what your piece is. And when you figure out your shadow, either that boss fades away, or your dynamic with each other will shift. But you're entangled with each other with your shadows, and this whole idea of the roles of mother. And because if you think about it, your boss really has power over keeping survival or destroying you. She could fire you. So it's that kind of creation destruction. She can create, you getting a promotion, or she can give you kick you out.
Yes. So I'm more interested in the relationships for some reason.
Oh, really? Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, because we see this phenomena that, let's say, a woman has power, financial power, independence. She's pretty much rejected the submissive mother role. Then when she meets a man that makes less than her, maybe she might not have a problem with it, but the guy might have a problem with it.
And she becomes his mother, in a way. Could be.
Yes, you have all those dynamics playing out. Like you were saying, this is just an example. Everyone is unique and different, but those dynamics have to play out. The struggle between love and power plays out in the couple, in the relationship.
And many times power equals money and authority.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so
independence.
Yeah. And so you see a lot of women that, famous women that are really successful, they struggle with relationships because the man makes less, or, he's not famous.
Yeah, we've seen it in our own industry, in the coaching industry. There are females that are very successful and their husbands take kind of the subservient role
Mm-hmm.
in the business anyway.
Yeah, and they then they end up resenting the husband, or like a way the husband can resent the wife and feel they're not in power, and so
Hmm.
yeah. And so also with dating, I think a lot of women that are professional and successful or some level of success, they're looking for their power match.
Right.
And but I think for women, I think it's really that power match they're looking for versus the love match. They kind of leave the love part separately. I mean, they get infatuated and all those things, but it's almost like love becomes secondary to when they approach it. And this is not everyone, but a lot of women I see, they're telling me about the matches they see. Oh, he has this degree, or he's, interested in this topic, and he seems to be successful, and he's well established, or oh my God, he still lives with his mother. I don't know if I can date this person. And it's like if they don't have power, it's like erased almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
all about their kind of really. It's not the guy, but they're projecting this idea that
Mm,
it's almost like a conflict. I want someone who's powerful and successful, because these same women will say if a guy is more successful than them, they feel like, oh, that he wouldn't want me. And they measure almost like their value and worth over their sense of power
hmm.
versus their ability to love.
Yeah. So, given this new dynamic that changed the game between men and women,
Mhm.
there's a big need to understand the psyche at this level,
Mhm.
because otherwise it's almost impossible for people to match up successfully,
Mhm.
because all this projection is going on and all this unconscious rejection.
Mhm.
If the woman rejects the the mother role, right, the
Mhm.
stay-at-home mother role, she's going to throw out love essentially.
Mhm.
And even though consciously she might say, I'm ready to create a relationship, the unconscious is going to prevent her from creating it, because she's going to project the loss of power
Mhm.
that
Well,
she
that's
saw.
exactly what I
The,
saw.
the, the reason she rejected the mother role was because the mother didn't have any power.
And here's the kicker. When I looked at my mother, I love my mother, and she's such a loving person. But I always had this perception that my dad controlled
Mm.
everything. And until later when I grew up, I realized how much my dad really loved her and adored her, and like he would call her when their wedding song would come on. He would be at work and go, "Hey, turn on this channel." I mean, he was so romantic. He didn't show any of that to us. And so
Of
I was
course not.
thinking he's just this tyrant, and he's saying, "Make dinner." And how come the,
Mm.
food's not on the table? And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to be like that." And then, and what I really realized is how much power she did have over him. Like he like put her on a pedestal. And but as kids, you don't see it. So it really is, you think you know your parents. You think you're like, I know them. This is what I experience. And you make all these judgments about your mother and your father, and you think you're right. And then you talk to your siblings and they're like, that's not what I saw at all. I remember one of my clients, she said she went to a funeral of her mother, and she said, they had four of them. And she said two of her siblings were talking about this great woman. And she said her and her other sibling were looking, going, who is this woman they're talking about? And so we have to, again, remember that what we're really putting in our minds and our
Mm.
psyche isn't who our mother was or our father was, but it's our perception of who they were. And
Yeah.
as we get older, this is the trickier part, is as we get older, we say, oh, I have a great relationship with my mother now. When I was younger, I didn't. And I was in my, teenage age and rebellion. And now I have this great relationship. Well, the template was formed before you were 8, almost 5, emotional template. So it doesn't mean, so you consciously outgrew them, but unconsciously those patterns are still there, and you're carrying them through relationships and through all relationships with your team, with your bosses, with your relationships. And so the mother is interesting. It's she's the giver of life. And you know what I love, what Jung says is that your relationship with your mother is how you perceive it, is how you perceive your relationship with the world. So if you saw your mother as nurturing and loving and trusting and kind, you will tend to trust the world. You trust things in the world. And if she made you feel worthy and good, you will tend to expect that of the world. But if you see your mother as that relationship being judgmental and critical, you are going to see the world as judgmental and critical and unsafe. And so think about how you see the world, how safe you feel to step out into the world, communicate with others, relate to men. And you'll know that that's the seed was planted very, very young of how you perceived, not how your mother was, but how you perceived that relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue into the next part, which is the spiritual element of the mother archetype. So back to individuation, as we get people to confront this part of their unconscious mind, their personal unconscious, their shadow, as Jung would call it, they're able to integrate and understand kind of why they've been pushing away love, or why they've been getting the results in romantic situations and in work because of that experience and that interpretation that they had in their unconscious mind.
Well, one more thing too is that a lot of our coaches, they start and they're coaching clients and they become the mother to the client in a way. They take on that mother role surrogately without not establishing that. But the client will tend to look to especially if she's female. If it's a male coach, they'll see the father role. And so a lot of our coaches, when they go to sell coaching packages, or I've seen this in all the coaching industry, they're so nervous about asking for the money, or
you're giving all our secrets
oh,
away.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying that but it's really a great opportunity that if you are a coach or you want to be a coach, you need to come to terms with the mother archetype. You need to understand so you can be a better coach to your clients. You can see their projections. You can be a good and not get caught up in your own mother stuff with them, like over giving and making sure smoothing things over all the time, and then sacrificing your own boundaries and all those things that we learn from our mothers, but like you said, it's like instinctually we learn how to behave and what's right and wrong and take on their patterns in a way.
Right. And the only way to get to the spiritual element of the mother archetype is once you integrate your personal mother in a sense, or your relationship with her. In other words, your personal shadow. Once you understand that it is part of your own psychology, your own mind that you're working with, not the external mother, not the things that happened in the past. This is where Jung says, I'm not what happened to me. I decide who I am, who I want to be. But you can only do that once you integrate these two elements, the persona and the shadow. Then you enter into what he called the symbolic life. And in the symbolic life, then you start to see the world as your mother, like you said.
As a almost like a life giver. It's a nourishing, warm, welcoming. It's like a womb in a way. It's just this that gives you everything you need. And so imagine going in your life and stepping out in whatever you want to do, find love, find, the right career, be more successful. Imagine the world is friendly to your plans. That Wallace Wattles. The world is friendly. It's nurturing. It's giving. It's abundant. That's the mother, and that would be a beautiful energy to bring. That's like the ultimate. Once you integrate the shadow, you start to see the world in a different way. You see yourself in a different way, and then that reflects out into the world.
Yeah, the spiritual level, the world, the physical universe is the mother energy, the feminine energy, the created, manifested universe. And the spirit is the father. And as human beings, we're right in the center. We're both spirit and matter. Our bodies are made out of matter, and we interact with the world in this physical way. But our spirit is tied to that consciousness, that pure consciousness that everything arises from.
So the father, or the masculine, is the active force that kind of, it gives us life. It propels us forward. It drives our will. And then the feminine is the receptive, the nurturing, the creativity, the abundant, the matter kind of coming to life.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if you don't water a plant, it loses its life. So we need to, how do we nourish our soul with spiritual knowledge so that we can be, nourish the matter? That's who we are, and be creative in our life. And a lot of people feel guilty. The mother thing is, don't take too much and don't take on too much, or I'll be a burden to other people. Like, that's a big mother thing. It's our right to grow as much as we can, to be as abundant as we can, as long as it's for more life. It's not from an ego sense. I mean, a lot of people, there's rich people that take money and they're hoarding it and they're using it for power. But truly, a true abundance is that you make the world a better place, that you're bringing that abundance. And by you being abundant, you're sharing that, making everyone around you happy and fulfilled. And
yes, because ultimately those two energies of spirit and matter are one.
mm-hmm.
There's no distinction.
But when they could be out of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like when we're out of balance, when we haven't integrated our shadow or our unconscious mind, we're split against ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're thinking everything is split. There's good and bad, and there's the out there and me in here. And instead of seeing it as harmonious, mm-hmm. right? Spirit and matter are meant to cooperate, and in that cooperation, we come about. This human mind that we have is, it's an incredible opportunity for us to really develop our spirituality. But a lot of people try to jump from
the biological to the spiritual without doing the psychological work. They haven't done the shadow work. And so then they go and try to balance masculine and feminine, but the feminine is still reflecting their personal history and their past prejudices and assumptions that are off base from truth. And they're acting from the wrong, not wrong, but an incorrect perception.
Yeah, that spiritual bypassing, we've seen a lot of that. And it's not a big problem. All it requires is a little bit of personal work, personal development. I guess that's why it's called personal development, because you have to work on your personal history.
And to quite simply talk about the process, it's really that we're meant to have more in life. We're meant to grow. That's our natural state. Spirit wants to grow and expand and be more of it, more life. And so we go in life and we have these desires for more. But our ego takes over and makes those desires for more about our worthiness, or if we're good enough, and then we can have those things that we desire. And then on the way to that desire, there's going to be conflicts. And so those conflicts are showing our internal conflict with ourselves over having that desire. That, what if I take too much? Or what if I lose myself to this person, this relationship, and all that stuff? So when we have a conflict or things aren't showing up, that's the work. It's really just working with what is inside of us that's triggering this conflict. My boss is giving me trouble. There's something here. It's actually, it's a step. It's almost like a muscle builder to go to the next level. Yeah. It's like when you see steps, there's like flatness, and then there's the flat part of the upper part of the step, and then the next level. It's like you have to hit that wall in order to go up. And so that wall is actually, it's not a block. It's actually a steps to take us there. And what happens is, in spiritual bypassing, is that people hit walls and then they're looking for another path. And they hit wall, I'm going to look for another path. And they end up being put in a box that they can't get out of. And they just make a different story about where they are and how it's meant to be, and how their true love isn't going to come for another 2 years. And that's okay, because that's divine and timing and all that stuff. And then we end up losing the wall, or the conflicts are really there as stairways and as ladders to our more awareness and more life. And so it's just really psychologically approaching it as an opportunity versus approaching it as something to get rid of or avoid.
Yeah, that's true. And the answers are always right there in the
Mm.
things that appear to be challenging you, to be like some people say that these things are blocking me.
Mhm.
They're not really blocking you. They're giving you an opportunity to work through them.
Mhm.
They're showing up, they're arising in your consciousness to teach you the lesson that you need to learn.
Mm.
And so it's about being very present to where you're at, what has come up for you, what you've created, and then you see that everything is perfect.
Mhm.
There's really nothing to change. All you have to do is open your mind and approach these things with that perspective,
Mhm.
that they're there to teach you, to guide you.
And one last thing before we go to questions is to really say, like, stop mothering yourself in a critical voice. Like, you should have done it better, and you screwed that one up. To be gentle with yourself and not so hard. And also, for me, I noticed that I was always often very careful. Like, I was afraid of conflict. As a mother, the mother archetype played out in me on a personal level is that wanting to make sure everyone was happy, and that and it turns into very controlling kind of
Mm,
patterns. So we end up controlling the relationships we have, the dating experience, the work experience. I noticed that I didn't take as many risks as I should have, because I mean, I kind of go from risk to not, but anytime I was stuck, I would feel that constriction of that mothering of the business. Like, the business
mm,
is my child, and I don't want to, like, it to be harmed, or I want to protect it, and that kind of just. And so when we talk about the mother being in the creative and the destructive, that we can actually have that tendency in us to be destructive when we're holding on too tight. We do this with relationships when we're trying to control the other person or nagging the other person. We kind of take the fun out of things, or we beat ourselves up and we take the fun out of life, and that's that destructive force of the mother. She kind of once has a good intention, but if the ego takes over, it just kind of
mm.
becomes very destructive.
Yes, and in thinking about our biological mothers, when we take this perspective, we see that they were doing the best they could.
Mhm.
So most of us, we love our mothers, uh,
Mm.
and almost all of us have a little resentment, perhaps,
Mm.
in the way we grew up, in something that happened, in the personal dynamics of dealing with this person that Jung says we're projecting the archetype onto them.
Mhm.
We're projecting this huge mother archetype onto one person, and that's a lot of responsibility that we're placing on them.
Yes, actually, that's a really good point. I read that we put an impossible uh, level of expectation on our mothers, that you're
Yes.
supposed to be good. You're never supposed to leave me. You're always supposed to love me, and we project that onto. And then imagine how that happens in relationships.
Right. But that projection is bound to cause a little resentment,
Mhm.
again, because the expectation is unrealistic.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're human beings. They're doing the best they can. They in turn were raised by an imperfect human being as well.
And in a different generation. I mean, think 2 generations back, the role of women is much different than it is now. I mean, most women, even 50 years ago, you could either be a nurse, you could be a school teacher,
Hmm.
or a housewife. I think those are the only 3 options you had. There really wasn't a lot of, "Oh, you could be a business executive," or
Yeah, and
mm.
so the approach helps us understand our biological mothers and drop all of that resentment or expectation of perfectness, like you said,
Mm.
and understand them as human beings. And then we can really love them and understand all they did for us. They brought us into the world, they cared for us, they clothed us, they
Mm.
protected us when we were most vulnerable. So they did us an incredible favor.
If we're alive today, we have to thank our mothers for that.
That's right. That's right.
And it's also too, if it's not a biological mother, if it's you were adopted, all that stuff that's even more complicated, and stepmothers, and you have more
And
than one
anybody
mother
that
role.
took care of us, because
Yeah.
I was
Even your
thinking,
nanny too, right?
yeah, I was thinking about this. I had so many mothers. I had my mother, of course, and then my two grandmothers, and then all my aunts.
Mm-hmm.
They were all caring for me. They were all mothers essentially, and family friends, and it just goes on and on. And so it's not just the biological mother, but it again, it's that larger archetype that we're dealing with, the world that sustains us, protects us.
And to accept the light and dark sides of both, and know that we have light and dark sides in ourselves, and they're not good or bad, they're just different elements. And the human ego, makes the judgments and assumptions around that. And it's all subjective. I mean, for some people, being direct and sure is better. I'd rather have someone tell me exactly how they feel than someone lie to me and say, "You're so great," and talk behind my back. So it's like, what is better, to be sweet and mischievous? And then you see this with your mother too. You could see that her being sweet to people and then talking behind to you going, "Oh, that Mary next door is just a terrible person. Why are you so nice to them?" You're learning how to be, and that kind of, do I trust when people are nice? So there's a lot that we absorb from our mothers, and that early life, she's really has such an influence on us. But we also want to thank her, and also remember that what we're seeing is a perception, and our own judgment of what we perceive happen. And it's always very different and unique for every person.
That's one of the things I've observed. People that take this process seriously and go through the individuation process with us, at the heart of it is often the relationship with the mother. And it changes. It changes. They proceed along the path.
For both men and women.
For both men and women. And the relationship with the mother then becomes something more meaningful and more intimate. They reconnect with it.
And it is the most spiritual thing we can do. And a lot of people think they connect with the spirit, and they think that's going to lead me to the promised land. But it's the soul of the mother that we really have to come to terms with, because that's the matter. That's the physical world. And that's our experience in the world. And that's all we have to be conscious of. We can't see the invisible. We can't feel the invisible. So we have that. The mother is a vessel for our life. So the world is that vessel, the body is our vessel, and the mother was a container for us growing up in the house and all that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to go to questions now. Okay. Just saw a loving message from my mom reminding me to eat well and take care of myself. That's such a mother, right? I love the duality of the depths of our emotions. They all have a place.
Absolutely.
That hits me in the feels. I have felt the pain too around not having children, even though I never really wanted them all that badly. Yeah, it's kind of like a society thing that we feel this expectation. And then a lot of people will ask, like, why didn't you have kids? Or even a woman, why don't you want children? If it's still, why would you want children? Like, it's the best thing in the world. I asked my friend that once. I was like, why don't you want kids? Like, I thought it was like the oddest thing, that not wanting children. And now I could see that, yeah, there's positive and negative in having children and not, and making those choices. And
I would say also that you don't have to have kids to be a mother. Like I was saying, my mom passed away, but one of my aunts, she's like my mother now.
Oh yeah.
And she never had kids, but to me, she's a mother image.
Yeah.
Right.
You talk about the mother archetype, but you recently talked about the mother persona. What's the difference? Well, the mother persona is real. The mother archetype is a broader term, which is the where the mother persona came from. So imagine the mother archetype being the role of the mother, and then a woman's role. She could either take the mother role and express her personal mother stuff in love, or she can take the role of the professional, or she could take the role of the lover, which is like, I just want to be sexual. And so it's all based actually on that mother relationship. So because the mother, there's many types of mothers, right? So there's many type of women. And Tony Wolff saw that back in 100 years ago, that women basically had 4 avenues. And I know women are much more complex than that, but it's really kind of a great way to think about it. You either become the wife, and then your children become a priority and the husband's like, but the kids, are the priority. Or you become the lover where the man is the priority, and you're just like you fall in love all the time and everything's about the man, and typically either the other woman or someone who's always obsessed with an unavailable man, but also doesn't want to be tied down to that mother role. And then there's the professional who she is basically she doesn't need a man because she has a career, so it's the rejection of the man. And then the mystic is kind of the woman who's more like a nun. A lot of women say, oh, I'm the mystic because I'm spiritual. No, it's not that. It's the persona of the mystic, which means she takes on the role of that God is my partner. Like a Pema Chodron would be the mystic persona, someone who is not married anymore. She doesn't care about the romantic relationship. So these are all based on the love persona relationship. So it's a finer point, more on the persona level. But the mother archetype does play a role in forming all those four. And if you haven't taken the love persona test, you should, and see what persona type you are and talk to one of our mentors about it. I don't know if we don't know duality as a child, then how do we certain unwanted traits go into the unconscious? How and when is that decided?
Oh, we know duality from very early on.
Hot and cold when we were born, 70 degrees from 90 degrees.
Yeah, and there's research with very young children, and they understand right and wrong very early on. And so it begins around 2.5. We start to understand good, bad, and our mind instinctually works that way.
In the book, A Child Called It, Dave Pelzer was extremely abused by his alcoholic mother. I understand as an adult, he's now responsible for his life. But what about when he was a child and his mother did the most horrendous things? Who is responsible for that? And how could he not be affected? His mother passed away, but I believe they never made peace.
Yeah, we're definitely impacted by our early history.
Yeah.
We're not saying, none of that matters. We know it matters, but it matters in a different way, that we can use it for our spiritual growth instead of in the typical, let's say, ego-based way of who's to blame for my failure, who's to blame for my depression, who's to blame for my anxiety, and we point to our parents or the mother in all situations. Now that's a unique case, so obviously individuation would not be as easy as for most of us, but not impossible. If the person is willing to do the internal work of realizing the nature of the mind, that we are spirit, we are essentially already enlightened, everything has been given to us, there's nothing to gain from the external world. Eventually they would reach a point where they could let go of that past history of abuse.
Well, let me put it this way. You all know who Oprah Winfrey is. She was sexually abused. She was sleeping on a porch. She was abandoned for a while by her mother. And then, she had a terrible childhood. Now, what she did was she created something. She created something else. And now if we create something to avoid that, but she came to terms with all that. But those things can't stop us if we always have a choice. We could say this terrible thing happened to me and therefore I am incapable. I'm broken. And so I can't have a healthy relationship. I can't have a normal life. Or we could say, you know what? All these things that happen to me, I'm going to use them to even be a better person and do what I can't do. Look at those people that have that little man, he just passed away. He was born with without any legs and he had little hands. He became a motivational speaker. He didn't let it stop him. And so I think it's not about pushing it away, but it's we all had, some people had it worse than others, but really what the freedom we do have is that we can create how we perceive what happened to us and how we perceive ourselves. And we can either play the victim or we can say, because of that, I'm going to even be better. I'm going to overcome my adversities. And if you read a lot of people that are heroes and people that you admire in your life, a lot of them had really tough lives and that didn't stop them. So it's always a choice whether, what's happening now in the world, things that are happening now, are you going to let that stop you? Or are you going to let that, how can I use this to be more powerful? How can I use this terrible marriage I was in and breakup to, in spite of that, I'm going to still open my heart to love. And those are the things that, how we approach it.
Absolutely.
My mother is always cheerful, independent, positive, and friendly. Why is she innerly cold, distant, controlling, and manipulative? So you're trying, so you're looking at your mother's shadow. So so it's not that she's that, but she's that. Those are the things she fears being. So a mother who's always cheerful and independent and positive and friendly, and that's her persona. That's not who she is. Remember, it's her persona, how she acts. That means that she probably bites her tongue because she can't be not cheerful. She can't be distant. So she has to have some kind of defense around that. And she's not really integrating all those other parts. And so we look at these things as, oh, that's all positive, to be cheerful. Is it positive to be cheerful? Like I said, to be nice, but talking about someone behind their back, or, and manipulative is something that the ego does all the time. We all have to admit to ourselves. It has a terrible word, but if you really examine manipulative, it's trying to influence someone else, right? For your own safety, to manipulate someone else. That's the whole idea of the ego. It's like always trying to manipulate. How do I get people to like me? How do I put on a good face? How do I fit in with everyone? And so in an extreme way, it's someone who's very controlling and manipulative and has a secondary gain. But if you think about it, we all do. We all have an ego that does that. So so there's a lot of like looking at the shadow. It's really what we're looking at is these traits are neutral. They're not negative or positive. That's the integration.
Yeah, I would just add, think about what triggers you about your mother. That's pointing to your personal work, to your shadow work. And so it's very useful when people trigger us, especially our parents, because they're pointing directly at what we need to work on. So think about the emotion and open it up.
And I also mentioned the love persona calls. That's one per person. So if you already had one, it's only one per person. We have always a waiting list for people. So just if you've had one already, take a pass. Okay, let's see. This person posted a couple times. She never speaks and takes responsibility. Yes.
Right. So ask yourself, what does that pull from me? What is my let's say my judgment about that? What does it mean that a person does not take responsibility? What is so bad about that? And you keep digging. You kind of you're going to try to get to the root emotion of that thought that you're having about her.
Yeah, but really, truly, to do the shadow work, you have to work with a coach. So we encourage you. We have coaches on staff if you're interested in doing this kind of work. And we also have our life coach training that's starting next month. That is a deep dive into all this stuff. So if you're interested, ask us about it. We'll send you the information. And on that note, we have intro to Jungian Depth Psychology classes. We're going to remove that by the end of day tomorrow. So make sure you watch those videos in the units. If you're interested in learning more about Jungian Depth Psychology, they're going away tomorrow. If you do want the replays, you have to register for them. So we'll send you a link. Make sure you access them because they're going away because we're making room for new stuff. So anyway, it's been a great talk today. Happy Mother's Day for those who are mothers, those who had mothers, and my heart goes to those of you who are childless like me. That there's plenty of people in the world that you can be the mother role for, and for me, it's always been what I do as a coach. I feel like I'm fulfilling that need and desire to care for others, and it's being fulfilled through that. So. And then I have children all around the world and they're all grown up. I don't have to change diapers, which is good. And I can travel wherever I want. I'm not having to take care of them.
Yeah. So we wish you a happy Mother's Day. And
wish your mother a happy Mother's Day. If she's not here, know that she's still here in some level, and just remember the love.
It's a very special time on the planet, and like in our individual life, the things that come up that challenge us are there to teach us. The things that are happening on the planet right now, they can be transformative. They can be our teachers, but we have to approach them in that way instead of just trying to solve them and going back to business as usual. Ask yourself, what am I learning about this? One of the things that I've been learning is what's really important in my life. What am I doing here? How am I using this time on earth? And it clarifies that concept for me, that the real important things are expressing love, compassion, finding that balance in between work and personal relationships, and not wasting it and being anxious or worrying, but doing the things that I know I need to do to protect ourselves and our communities. But at the same time, finding that spiritual ground of it all.
Yeah, and actually, there was an interesting comment that I missed when I watched Joker. Remember that movie, Joker? Very intense, a total shadow, total mother archetype movie, very deep. In the scene, he found out the truth about her mother, his mother, and the time he completely turned dark. Why would Oprah Winfrey choose to rise up, but Joker choose destruction? Maybe it's because Oprah had life coaches and mentors. Well, that's it. Like the whole idea of Joker was that he wasn't nurtured by the world. He was beat up all the time. And it was like he didn't have, like, he tried to be good. And then when he didn't have any like role model to help him, to nurture him at all. So he went to destruction. And so in a way, the destruction is a wake up call sometimes for the other parts of the world that we do need to nurture the world and people in the world, and we can't dismiss people. And there's a lot of division with politics these days, and who thinks the corona is a hoax and not, and who should wear a mask and not. And it's like we need to love the world like a mother would love, with unconditional love, is start to love each other and maybe there's someone out there that you see on Facebook and they're struggling, and you just say, hang in there, that you might have changed their life. You be the mother to them. And we've all had mothers, and we can all play that role of the nurturing, caring one. And we're here to take care of each other, not tear each other apart. And I think we need to bring that back into this world a little more. That's how we're going to survive as in the human race. And I do believe the women of this world are going to be the forces to balance everything out, and they're going to bring a different energy. And the more we rise to leadership and take on our roles and our power back, and not just discount them and say, well, the men have all the power. Have both of us not hate the men, but integrate. How can we be feminine and masculine? How can we not resent the power? And how can we understand and nurture the world and have that balance? Big topic. Yeah. If you haven't seen the Joker, there's some graphic scenes, but it's really intense about the lack of nurturing and like how it can be destructive. And we all have the choice. And Oprah had a choice. She had other nurturers in her life. Like she had some love in her life, and people around her grandmother, I think her grandmother was very dear to her.
Yeah. And the Joker is also an archetype of the trickster. We should do a call on the trickster, although
I don't know if we're ready for that.
we have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
But, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Yes. And for the weekend, just if you're not a mother, be a mother to someone. Reach out to a friend. Say, how can I just listen and be supportive for them? If you are a mother, reach out to your kids, even if you're having trouble with them. How can you listen to them more? How can you be more nurturing to them? And your mother too. How can you be nurturing to her? and love her more, and allow yourself to be nurtured, which is a big thing for us women. We feel like if we're nurtured, we lose our power. And so anyway, I'd love to, if you're listening to the replay, we'll, still be looking at the comments. We'd love to hear what your experience is. I know there's a lot we laid on today. We always tend to lay on a lot, but we're here, and the mentors are here to support you if you have questions. And happy Mother's Day.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.